As evening approached, there came a rich man from Arimathaea named Joseph, who had himself become a disciple of Jesus. Going to Pilate, he asked for Jesus' body, and Pilate ordered that it be given to him. Joseph took the body, wrapped it in a clean linen cloth, and placed it in his own new tomb that he had cut out of the rock. He rolled a big stone in front of the entrance to the tomb and went away.
Hello, I'm Emma Brown. Welcome to this major discovery. Join us as we take you on a journey to discover the great missing rolling stone from the tomb which Joseph of Arimathea cut out of his own new tomb. And when they looked, they saw the stone was rolled away, for it was very great. Mark 16:4. Quite often the facts don't always seem as they are. However, we believe in this case the facts are as they seem. My husband Simon, having studied and being fascinated with the Garden Tomb in Jerusalem and making a documentary on this subject in 2007.
Our search for the tomb of Jesus.
The fire in him never went out. Because of this, he had good knowledge regarding the Garden Tomb history. If you're not aware of this story, there is a tomb in Jerusalem called the Garden Tomb, which was believed to be owned by Joseph of Arimathea. He was a wealthy man and owned a garden with a tomb cut out of the rock. Also contained in the garden was a wine press and one of the largest water wells in Jerusalem. Inside the tomb were cut out 2 sepulchres where the dead were laid.
To the front, we see the weeping chamber. The mourners would be women. And on the right, here, a low wall hewn from the rock divides the room. Below, a pillow has been cut out of the rock, and beyond, an unfinished tomb, perhaps intended for Joseph of Arimathea's wife.
Next to this rich man's garden, embedded in the cliff, is a feature of a skull.
From time immemorial, it had been called Skull Hill, and Golgotha is Aramaic for the place of the skull. If we look at the site from here, we can clearly see the shape of the eye sockets and the nose.
Just outside the old city of Jerusalem, near a popular entrance into the city called the Damascus Gate.
That the site where Jesus was crucified and where he was buried was outside the city walls.
Now, you may say, so what? Well, this is what amazed us. The garden, the tomb, the wine press and the water well, which must have belonged to a rich man, were all next to the feature of the skull and were all written down in the 4 Gospels nearly 2,000 years ago. We have no doubt in our minds that the Garden Tomb is a replica of the Gospels, but many believers still disagree. Scholars generally agree that the Garden Tomb is not the site of Jesus' burial. According to Holy Land specialists, they say there is no possibility that it is in fact the place where Christ was buried, and it is in their opinion that the Church of the Holy Sepulchre preserves a more accurate tradition. However, Simon believes he can prove that they are terribly wrong, and we shall return to this later. There is something missing from this argument. What, you may ask? Let me remind you, it is the rolling stone. As told to us in all four Gospels. Just in case you're not familiar with the story, the Gospels tell us that after Joseph of Arimathea claimed the body of Jesus from Pontius Pilate, he laid the body of Jesus in the new tomb and rolled a large stone over the entrance. 3 days later, the Gospel of Matthew tells us, the two Marys went to the tomb to anoint the body of Jesus. When they arrived at the tomb, they saw an angel roll the stone open and sit on it.
After the Sabbath, at dawn on the first day of the week, Mary Magdalene and the other Mary went to look at the tomb. There was a violent earthquake, for an angel of the Lord came down from heaven, and going to the tomb, rolled back the stone and sat on it.
So where is the large rolling stone? Why is it not at the garden tomb? Who took it and why? Now, for the first time in nearly 2,000 years, we will prove to you in this film that we have discovered the missing rolling stone. But will you believe? At least I ask you to please hear our story and then make up your own mind. We believe you will not be disappointed if you approach it with an open mind. In the new year of 2011, ideas kept popping into Simon's head, and one of them was to update his website with videos. As he did this, he came across a video of Christians pushing a great stone, and as soon as he saw this, he nearly fainted. Instantly, he believed it was the famous missing rolling stone, to the garden tomb told to us in the Gospels. Simon couldn't stop staring at the photo of it. The more he stared at it, the more he was convinced it was the stone. It looked like the right size and it looked like the same type of rock. However, the thickness was impossible to tell by looking at a photo. He knew that the channel in the garden tomb where the stone would have rolled down was just over 1 foot wide, because he had measured it in his previous documentary in 2007. If this rolling stone in the photo he saw was thicker than the channel, it could not be the one, so it was time to do some research. He sent an email to the monastery asking, "Please, do you know where this stone came from? And do you know how old it is and why it is there?" 2 days later, he received an email from them saying it was found in an old village and was used as a fortified door for a monastery. But here was the exciting bit. They did not know how it got there or why it was made in the first place. Here was their email. Just what Simon wanted to hear, as this made sense to him. The evidence started to pile up and point towards it being the missing rolling stone. He then searched for many hours for any history of the stone, and there must be some. Surprise! There was no history to the stone before it was found in the old monastery. That was it. Simon knew he had to go and see it for himself and take some measurements. Simon was so confident this was the stone to the tomb that he sent emails to the Garden Tomb in Jerusalem. As you would expect, they would not take him seriously. He realised that he was on his own. Simon then continued with his investigations. It was time to prepare to go and see if he was mad, as many believed, or if this was God's will. Simon had to find out. He told a Christian friend called Christine, and she believed him, being inspired by his previous films. She decided to go with him, and Simon was pleased to say yes, as I was unable to travel with him at that time. 3 weeks later they was off to the Holy Land. Simon knew the thickness of the stone had to be just over a foot, as if it was much more his trip would have been a waste of time. When they arrived to the location of the stone, which was a little sign next to it saying, the Abu Bad, rolling stone once used as a fortified door. Simon looked at it with amazement. On applying his tape measure, it was just over a foot wide. Simon thanked God for being there. The thickness seemed to be just right, and after taking some footage and more measurements, the next day they went to the Garden Tomb. Simon didn't want to get too excited until he had taken measurements of the channel where the stone rolled across the Garden Tomb. When they got to the tomb, it was crowded with people, and they had to be patient for over an hour. After sitting opposite the tomb and staring at it, Simon couldn't wait any longer. He grabbed his tape and went straight to the channel to take the measurements. His eyes nearly popped out of his head. The width of the channel was around 15 inches wide, and the rolling stone was also around 15 inches wide, give or take a few centimetres each way. As the stone has some damage, and the width of the rolling channel in the Garden Tomb varies slightly. However, this you would expect being nearly 2,000 years ago, and with the many battles Israel has had, the rolling stone still remains in one piece. We only have to look at how many times the city of Jerusalem was destroyed and rebuilt to believe that the stone and the tomb still remaining is a miracle for which God has a purpose. However, questions arise. The more we try to understand the facts, the more questions arise. If this is the great stone that Joseph had cut out of the rock of his tomb, then how did it end up around 25 miles away from the tomb? Also, why would this great stone be taken from its original place? Let me tell you. A word comes to my mind, Byzantium. The Byzantines left an indelible mark on their lands, and you can see their influence in the cities and their architecture. Typified by a Greek cross plan, or later the cross in square design, this can be seen in the churches, most notably in the Dome of the Rock in Jerusalem.